world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
Not sure how to tackle your taxes? Are you sweating the small print? You may be experiencing FOMO, the fear of messing up. The answer? Using TurboTax on Intuit Credit Karma. They help you get your biggest refund, and then we help you do more with it. With a personalized plan designed to help you hit your money goals. It's time to take your taxes to the max. Start filing today in the Credit Karma app.
Your favorite local grocery stores like Kroger, Ralph's, Fred Meyer, and more are now delivering on Uber Eats. Get 40% off your order of fresh, quality ingredients. Whether you just got home to an empty fridge or suddenly got a craving to whip up something new, you can get everything you need delivered in as little as 25 minutes. Get 40% off your order with code Kroger2026. Plus, members get $0 delivery fees. Order now on Uber Eats. Orders of $30 or more save up to $25. Ends 4/30/26. See app for details.
Welcome to the New Books Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Academic Life. This is a podcast for your academic journey and beyond. I'm the producer and your host, Dr. Christina Gessler. And today I am so pleased to be joined by Professor Schwartz, who is the author of Try to Love the Questions, From Debate to Dialogue in Classrooms and Life. Welcome to the show, Professor Schwartz.
Thanks for having me.
I am so glad that you're here and that we get to talk about this book that I was up late reading. There's so much in it, and I know we won't get to all of it, but I'm excited for what we can do in this time together. And before we do that, will you please tell us about yourself?
Sure. So now I'm thinking, actually, what's the first most important thing? I teach at American University. I'm a lawyer by training. I come to my teaching from a life in advocacy, particularly civil rights and access to justice. And I run a program I founded on dialogue across differences called the Project on Civic Dialogue. As a person, I am originally from New York, and I've been living in Washington, D.C. for most of my adult life, such as it is. I have a son in college, and I'm living in this world in higher ed right now, experiencing tectonic changes and doing my best every day to keep the endeavor meaningful and productive and vital for myself and my students and my colleagues.
Usually I ask people to tell us a bit about their own journey through higher education, but instead I would like to ask you a question from your appendix, which is looking back on your own college, graduate school, apprenticeship, or training experience. Were you ever surprised or confused about what was expected of you?
Yes. I didn't really know what was expected of me in law school. And it's a strange thing to think about now because I was a high achieving college student. I earned high grades and honors. I was very involved. I served as a student writing fellow, which was an honor and a real joy that helps me now. And so I think in a lot of ways, I was very prepared for law school, and I was certainly prepared to read long books because I had been an English major. And so I was great at critical reading. But I didn't really know that I was welcome to take up space, and seek some kind of support in becoming who I was going to be with my professors. And it's an interesting question to get today. I got up this morning and, LinkedIn was open on my browser when I turned on my computer. And so I read the news that my favorite law school professor had passed. And one of the things that stood out to him and made him my favorite law school professor was he did an extraordinary job of making students feel seen. I had sheepishly asked him for a recommendation letter because I had done reasonably well in his class and really, really liked his teaching a lot. And he was delighted, and he acted like this was just a wonderful idea. And then he showed me a little excerpt that really spoke to me, like, this guy knows more about me than just, wrote a decent exam. And I was thinking about it today, processing what a huge impact he had on me. But also realizing he was able to have this impact in part because I had no earthly idea that I had a right, or it would be a good idea to go and engage with these faculty, try and find out what they have to offer, try and find out how my life trajectory could be helped or shaped by what they knew. And honestly, my entire career is really about very explicitly being that professor and that resource and letting people know. Nobody's going to be surprised that I want to help them because I tell them. And so I think that keys into a primary piece of teaching advice that I give, which is just be explicit. Just tell people what it is you want and what we're doing here. And if you're not sure, think about it. And if you think it depends, have that conversation with students and kind of co-generate that.
Your book is called Try to Love the Questions. And it's going to invite us to sit with discomfort of not knowing and being in questioning spaces. You have a number of exercises that you invite students to do, that you invite to be held in classrooms. There are thought questions. We opened with an example of one that's in an appendix at the back, but they're sprinkled throughout every chapter. And I'm curious, what inspired you to write this book?
I get a lot of calls and emails asking for support and guidance in creating the kind of dialogue programming that I'm able to create over at AU where I work. And I find that I'm saying a bunch of things again and again. And I can't be everywhere for everyone. And I found that, if I can assemble this into a text, it's going to be enormously useful to people. But also back on that kind of core idea of my teaching, which is be explicit. If nothing else, be explicit. What are we doing here? You think about big life events start with, we are gathered here today too. The part of school, the part that I think is magic, the part of school that couldn't be an email, is so vitally important. I think it's the part that keeps a lot of us teachers excited to be teachers, right? Because that part certainly isn't, grading or faculty meetings or, it's really, really important, but nobody teaches it. There isn't, we have writing classes. We have research methods classes. We don't have participation and engagement courses. And one of the things that I think this does is, leads to that question you asked of, have you ever been surprised? And I think that appendix was my appendix for faculty, where I'm asking faculty some questions about how ready they are to get into the classroom and teach and do dialogue. And if you've ever been surprised about what was expected of you, this should give you a space of empathy and say, okay, how can I make it explicit to my students? What's expected of them, what we expect together. I found that very few people have conversations about what we expect of our time together. And it's one of the areas where the gap between what it is we faculty would really like to achieve in the classroom and achieve in the higher ed experience generally, and what a new participant might guess success looks like, is wider than maybe anywhere else. And so, follow my own advice, be explicit. This is a conversation with students, and it turns out faculty as well, about what we can do together and how we get that done and what norms and expectations and boundaries might, inform and bound that.
And you make explicit in the book that students don't arrive at college prepared for how a college classroom is structured, and they don't arrive having spent much time practicing good faith dialogue. And that's something that you really dig into in the beginning, and then we dig into more granularly in chapter 3, which is called Understand the Rules and Norms of College Discourse. Before we do that, though, I'd like to talk about what inspired the title of the book. You tell us that when you were a college student, you were given a book called Letters to a Young Poet, and one particular poet that you read in there led to the inspiration for the title, and there's a passage when we open the book from that poet as well. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. And actually a former teacher of mine, gave me this book, Letters to a Young Poet. And as someone who teaches now, this book, a young poet reached out to the poet Rilke and asked him questions, and he asked about becoming a poet, but he asked about life as well. And this book is those letters in response. And so I think there's something really beautiful about this book's existence in a sense, because it's a conversation between people, someone young and wondering and inquiring and curious, and someone more established and really lovingly offering attention. That the passage that inspires the book is it tells the poet that he's so young and right at the beginning, before all beginning of his life, that he needs to sit in the questions. He needs to try to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. And the thing is to live the questions, rather than looking for the answers, to live the questions and you'll actually live your way into the answers by loving the questions. So I've always thought that this was very inspiring. I actually, for a long time, I used to keep that excerpt in a Word doc in the desktop of my computer, as a little Word doc. And when I'd have students come in, and it's I think 21st century college students, they're very driven to make good on their investment in education. They're very concerned about their future, about paying for their education. And I get students, who are young people, first year students, saying, I'm worried because I don't know if I want to be, this kind of intellectual property lawyer or this other kind of intellectual property lawyer. And they're like 19. And I would thoughtfully sort of scratch my chin, print out the Rilke passage, go grab it off the printer, bring it back to them and say, no, I want you to sit with this. And so it had been a part of my mentoring for some time. When I thought about, and we can talk about the book's core idea is about questions and how we design them and how we approach them. When I started with thinking about including it in a working title, I was really happy. But I was saying love the questions and not try to love the questions. And as I got writing, I thought, the try is key here. This idea that we're going to be this work in progress, and that so much of what I want to teach and share about dialogue is this trying, this idea of moving toward, and including, failing, falling short, being at a low level of attainment, on our journey. This idea of trying and not just loving the questions, felt really important. And it also felt really important because intellectual humility is very hard. And one of the hardest things that we can do, which your podcast audience is doing right now, and I applaud it, is just listen. Just making space for other people, making space for what's to come, is very hard. And I think, understanding that the world that we're in isn't divided among sort of virtuous people who are open-minded enough to withhold judgment, and kind of closed-minded radicals or something. That's not really how the world works. How every conversation works is, we put in the effort that we can. We try to put in the effort that we can. And so, I think the title is one of my favorite things about the book, but I think a lot about how every word of it really reflects what I'm hoping to get across.
AI is incredible. It can teach you how to fry an egg and even write a poem, pirate style. Yarr! But it knows nothing about your work. Slackbot is different. It doesn't just know the facts. It knows your schedule. It can turn a brainstorm into a brief. And it doesn't need to be taught. Because Slackbot isn't just another AI. It's AI that knows your work as well as you do. Visit slack.com/meet Slackbot to learn more.
Get internet plus mobile from Comcast Business. It can save you hundreds a year on your wireless bill over T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon, and help turn your business into a money-saving, gig-speed hotspot harnessing, fully mobile modern business. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
Restrictions apply. Not available in all areas. Comcast Business Internet required. Compares 2 unlimited intro lines and lowest price 5G plans of top 3 carriers. Taxes and fees extra. Reduced speeds after 30 gigabytes of usage. Data thresholds may vary. Gig speeds available via hotspots to Comcast Business mobile customers only. Actual Wi-Fi speeds vary. Not guaranteed.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin. Saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
The prologue is called On Trying, and it shares much of what we shared with us here. You say in it, this book is for those who are interested in trying. At other places in the book, you remind us that not all questions are lovable, which I appreciated very much. But one of the things that you're setting up for us in the prologue is that college brings together people in conversation like nowhere else. College is a place where people from all over the world, from corners of your country that you've never visited, from all kinds of backgrounds, come. And they can end up in the same classroom together. And that's a rare experience. Most people who arrive at college have never had that kind of experience before, and few will be able to reproduce it after they've finished their higher ed journey. But you talk about how this can be an important model for life beyond college, and that fact gives you a lot of hope for humanity. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. And I think, college can be more heterogeneous than most spaces that people are in. And I do think the idea of bringing people together in a room to be in discussion with one another, to learn with one another. And in the case of residential college, which is, a bit under half of our higher ed world, it's about 40%, sometimes to live together, to be almost like a little city. One thing that I think that I've come to appreciate more since writing the book, and maybe just over the course of doing a lot of talks on it and teaching in a lot of spaces, is that truly any room that includes multiple people will involve multiple perspectives. And so one of the things that I think we need to do is not be too hasty to assign perspectives to people based on their experiences or identity, and not be too hasty to declare a space inadequately heterogeneous based on guessing what the people in the room think. And I've seen this a lot at my own university, which falls into the stereotype of a university that supposedly got like a liberal monoculture, or the majority of people are described as liberal or described as Democrats. And I think if you take people's voting records, you will find that it's lopsided. But the heterogeneity of positions that people hold, or interests that they have, or concerns that they have about literally every topic I've ever introduced into conversation or witnessed happening in conversation, is mind-blowing. So at the same time as I think I applaud and I want to save from unprecedented threats, the idea of a college as a place that actually brings together a more heterogeneous group in a lot of ways than most of our institutions, most of our civic and social institutions in this country. I also want to explode the idea, I would say unfounded and unsupported idea, that even when you get a group of people that, whether, that their sort of census data could tag them as kind of a monoculture, you're actually going to find just extraordinary diversity of viewpoint. But you're only going to do that if you look for it and if you design conversations in the ways that find it.
Chapter 1 is called Think If You Should, Paradigm Shifts on Campus Discourse. And that chapter is really taking us into the skill of good faith dialogue. You talk about expressive freedom, also known as free speech. And you talk about the fact that having a right does not let us know exactly how to use it. And it doesn't let us know what the consequences could be. Just because something's legal doesn't mean you face no consequences in the real world. Can you talk about what you mean by the skill of good faith dialogue?
Sure. So, my teaching, my writing, the work that I do is motivated by the idea that what we do together when we're communicating, listening, writing, engaging in dialogue, engaging in that back and forth, is a skill. It's a skill to be learned, and it's a skill that can be taught. And so we know that's the case with writing. We know that's the case with a number of other college level skills, such as time management, research methods, scientific method, etc., academic integrity. And so this is one of them. Good faith dialogue, and particularly productive academic dialogue, I would say is what we would do if we wanted to understand, and the skill involved in doing what we would do if we wanted to understand consists of recognizing some kind of neutral standard of quality. So if I'm proposing to you my idea about how the flu spreads, I'm going to use the language and methods of science to say that to you, to inquire about it, and to show you that I've proven this in some way. And our dialogue is going to take the form of biology and public health science. So there are skills, and the skills that we have, if we're lawyers or psychologists or philosophers, they all fall into, there's some kind of agreed upon norm that we might use. And one of the skills, particularly in critical studies or in studies like philosophy, is questioning the norms we have and inquiring about them and saying, do these even pertain? The good faith component is, am I in this dialogue because I want to understand, or I want you to understand, I want to be understood? We have an assumption going into a classroom that everybody going into the classroom wants to become more knowledgeable about the subject matter. They want to, when they're offering their own perspectives, they're doing so from a place, of they're not being dishonest. They're trying not to infuse dishonesty in the form of disinformation. And their intention is not to hurt anyone, or, although that is not a guarantee. Because lots of the time we can intend one thing and have another outcome. And so the practice of good faith dialogue is what we do if we're trying together to do something together to increase our understanding in some way, and the skill of it is using the skills that make it worthwhile for a class, so this is like, do the reading, check your sources. And we're also doing it in ways such that our presence with others, we're really engaging in the skill of being together. So if I'm in a good faith dialogue with someone and I mispronounce their name, one of the skills that I'm going to need is humility and gratitude when they correct me. So there are pieces of our dialogue that are what I think academics would recognize as those neutral disciplinary standards and norms. And there are pieces of our dialogue that reflect the pieces of our dialogue skills that reflect that we're human. And we're working with other humans, and we're going to learn from them what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and why, and what their perspective is, not only on the material that we're discussing, but on our own contributions and our own ways of engaging with that.
You tell us in that section that there is no law on how to be kind. You remind us that rules aren't a how-to guide, and you go through a number of things that you see as key components of dialogue skills: liberty, personal responsibility and accountability, accept possibilities that we could be wrong, commit to try again tomorrow where we fall short today. The liberty piece, I think, is more timely perhaps than when you first wrote this book, because without that ability to know that we can speak, we're silenced at go.
Yes. In the book, I refer to a scene from Jurassic Park, which, for listeners who haven't seen this movie, the premise is, someone figures out a way to create dinosaurs using ancient DNA, like preserved in amber. And so they make an amusement park full of dinosaurs, and it works out not to be a great idea. And in the book, they have this chaos theory mathematician visit the park and give his feedback, which seems like his feedback would have been much more useful in advance, but, be a less exciting movie about a proposal that failed to get funded. And he says about this amusement park full of carnivorous giant things, your scientists were so preoccupied with figuring out if they didn't stop to think if they should. And when I wrote the book, when I was envisioning the book and drafting the book and editing the book, I thought about that scene a lot as it connects to the way that people in higher ed were talking about free speech before late 2023. And it was basically, I was hearing a lot of heat about concerns about self-censorship being a crisis, concerns about students objecting to speakers coming to campus. And there was some truth to, I actually believe that we really need a lot of freedom to invite and have speakers and say stuff, including when it offends somebody. But it felt like the wrong conversation, because here we are in higher ed, which is what we do if we want to understand, right? Higher ed is just like dialogue. It's what you do if you want to understand. And we're having these arguments about, like, provocateurs who are talk show hosts or news personalities, or people whose entire career is based on just showing up at colleges at the invitation of one group and then making a whole news cycle, or many of them, about how another group objected to them. And I felt like my message was, yes, I'm always going to protect your right to say things, but please stop to think if you should. I don't think we make a campus better by inviting some jerk who has a radio show to spew insults about other people. And I think we want to use the responsibilities that come with our rights wisely. What happened in the last couple of years is I really feel like I'm seeing the flip side of that idea, stop to think if you should. What starts happening after October of 2023 is institutions start cracking down on tons of speech, including speech that is manifestly protected by the First Amendment, and using their regulatory power like a cudgel in a way that technically, like legalistically, like, yes, you can say people can't hold a sign in an assembly. It's a time, place, manner restriction. But overall, the level of crackdown on a specific kind of speech really shows that these institutions, at the behest of the federal government and some other people, are using their regulatory power in a manner that's often coloring within the lines of their legal authority, but is really, really making a bad situation on campus where the people on campus simply don't have equal access to share their ideas in a way that is vital to our mission of understanding one another. And so now I think of that scene, that quotation from both sides. I think, if you're a student group and you want to invite a speaker, you should really think if you should, and you should be thinking about, can that person help this learning community understand something important that they need to understand, which is usually not the case with some provocateur. But then to administrators, you can, if you're a private institution, ban people from sitting down together in the library, all with the same T-shirt or laptop sticker that says the message that they want to convey, and privately studying together in solidarity. You could win a lawsuit about that if you're a private university. But what you've done when you've put your thumb on the scale and made it very clear to a whole community that some topics are completely verboten, no matter how civilly and non-disruptively conveyed, think if you should.
And you talk about that in the book, the importance on reflecting what we want to communicate and why. And you point out that there are different, basically sets of rules, whether you're on a private campus or a public one. And it reminded me of when I was in college. I was at a private school, and we had to do a senior project that in some way was a project for the community. And I had recently lost a longtime friend to AIDS, and I was not able to go to say goodbye or be part of the celebration of life. And I did not know that that's what he had. He kept it really private. Even in that time period, it's still so stigmatized. So my senior project for the community was trying to figure out a way to do a fun, interactive learning project that destigmatized sexual health. And so I put together this pamphlet and this little test, and there was a fair where everybody had to sort of present what their project was. And everyone on campus came, and people from outside campus, I believe, as well. And so you got this little pamphlet, and you could take this little test, and you'd win a prize. And the Red Cross came, and they answered students' questions, and they gave out condoms. And I did not know that the school's official policy was abstinence, because I lived in the dorms. And so you would not definitely know that from having spent time with your peers. And so more than one professor came up to me and said, I really appreciate what you're doing here. It's so important, and that you would risk it senior year. And I was like, what? And so I found out that, I could have been disinvited to graduate. And yet they had discretion. And they felt that it was something that needed to be done. It had long needed to be done. They appreciate my approach. And more than one person in authority came and said, you know what? They will do this because of you and because you made it fun. Like if we had tried to have our health center do this or something, they wouldn't go. They wouldn't ask. And so it reminded me that it's what side of history you're on at the moment, because there's so much discretion in how these First Amendment policies butt up against official policies on private campuses.
Yes. I'm not a proponent of the intellectual diversity theory, and I hope we can talk about that. But a place where I absolutely concur with some of the free expression proponents who were sounding the alarm about higher ed, some years back, who are a little bit silent now, is that disagreement and lack of safety are not the same. When we describe discomfort with being disagreed with, when we describe discomfort with the presence of someone's disagreement, with someone's statement of an idea that we don't like, in the language of safety, we really do ourselves an enormous disservice. It is enormously painful to be in a close-knit community, be in a residential community that especially, that's your entire home. If you're at a selective college, to be at a school that you were sold as this special place that only a few people can be in, and then see the presence of ideas that you find abhorrent, right? I think it's a challenge in particular with the selective college idea, because, you're told, well, only special people are here, and then the school protects someone's ability to say something you find abhorrent. It's really jarring for people. But the answer to that jarringness, the answer to that discomfort, isn't to ban people's speech. And that was true when it was, efforts to shut down bringing some conservative scholar or even some obnoxious provocateur to campus. And it's true now when people describe the existence of pro-Palestine advocates or discussion in terms of the safety of Jewish students. Safety and emotional comfort are both important, and they are distinctive concepts. When we blur the lines between them, we make it harder to do a lot of the things that schools are supposed to do. And my hope would be that people across the spectrum of ideology, of political preference, could together agree that we need to preserve our capacity to hear one another and have our ideas engaged with in good faith, rather than wielding cudgels to prevent people from engaging with their ideas.
You mentioned that you wanted to explain the intellectual diversity theory. I'm not sure everyone's familiar with what that is.
Yeah, thank you. So there's an idea that has often been in the discourse in parallel with and in kind of concert with more concerns about free expression, particularly as I was writing this book. The landscape has shifted a little bit, which was that schools are insufficiently heterodox. The schools, who teaches in them, who goes to them, they're a monoculture, and they're only one kind of people, and another kind of people aren't there, and this is hurting the schools. And in particular, the idea is there aren't enough conservatives, and that is proven and measured by how people vote or vote for president generally, or self-identify as liberal, moderate, conservative. And often in parallel with that, there'll be varying degrees of and we need to do something about that by like recruiting for more people who are conservative, or recruiting for more, making institutes for people who are conservative. And I really disagree with this approach for a bunch of reasons. One reason is I don't believe that humans have preset identities of liberal and conservative. And one of the things that we've seen over the years is that these categories are completely undefined in intellectual diversity discussions, and they just don't hold up. They're so fluid. And an example would be if you and I were doing a podcast before 2020, and we asked whether interest in vaccines was liberal or conservative, or disagreement with vaccine science was liberal or conservative. The very small, fringy anti-vaccine movement that we'd be able to find, we would find a bit on the left in kind of, certain vegetarian, organic foods type communities that we would not associate with conservative America, not associate with Republicans. And that's what we'd find. We would find a completely different alignment of how vaccines connect to political ideology or ideological sort of identity formation today. Completely switched. And it's because, actually, these are sort of fake categories. They're not really the kinds of categories that we have in higher ed. You know, are you a philosopher? Are you an economist? Are you a public health science? They're really cultural. They're really about what do people like me in my group that I feel comfortable with and feel very wedded to, what do they think about this stuff, right? So to reify the idea of conservative or liberal as a category in higher ed, to me, leans into a very toxic thing that happens outside of higher ed, where people evaluate ideas based on what, quote, people like me think of those ideas, rather than the kind of inquiry that we engage in education. So giving those false categories more strength, it's inconsistent with how higher ed works. I think it reinforces polarization. It says, hey, we've got this very polarized society. Let's think of this other place that has completely different norms in terms of those polarized teams that pertain outside. So I think that's a real waste of higher ed. And I think it also belies the fact that I have never in my life met a thoughtful human who holds every position that ends up being the sort of party line or voting position or platform plank of the party they're more likely to vote for. It's just not how humans are. So I think this idea of reifying people as liberal or conservative in that way, which are unstable categories and categories that don't really align with what we do in higher ed. What I propose we do instead, and this is the core idea of the book, is to look at questions from a much more expansive and inquiring lens, rather than the polarized lens of red and blue, black and white, yes or no, that tends to even inform questions like, is this faculty member liberal or conservative on a survey?
LinkedIn is pretty amazing at helping you grow your small business. We cannot make your email response time faster. We can help you sell, market, and hire in one place. We cannot help you find space for your 3 desk drinks. Why do you have 3? And while we can't help you find the perfect volume for your presentation video, LinkedIn can help you find the perfect audience for your business. Grow your small business on LinkedIn. Learn more at linkedin.com/smallbusiness.
Get in the game with the college-branded Venmo debit card. Wreck your team with every tap and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash, a new rewards program from Venmo. No monthly fee, no minimum balance, just school pride and spending power. Get in the game and sign up for the Venmo debit card at venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
Zootopia 2 has come home to Disney+.
Let's go!
Get ready for a new case.
We're the greatest partners of all time!
New friends.
Gary the Snake.
And your last name?
The Snake.
Dream Team. Get new habitats.
Zootopia has a secret reptile population.
You can watch the record-breaking phenomenon at home. Zootopia 2, now available on Disney+, rated PG. And right now you can get Disney+ and Hulu for just $4.99 a month for 3 months with a special limited time offer. Ends March 24th. After 3 months, plan auto-renews at $12.99 a month. Terms apply.
So for listeners who are wondering how you move into this space of inquiry, there's several questions that begin on page 11 and move into page 12. And we'll just quickly list those for the listeners. And this is called What Does It Take? And it's about developing a mindset of inquiry and building your skills as a reader, listener, and communicator. And you say you will need to, 1, learn to love the questions and to seek answers with integrity. 2, understand the rules and norms that apply to your conversations. 3, listen and read with a mindset of informed generosity and grace. 4, communicate to be understood. 5, engage in self-reflection. You go on to say that this book won't tell you what's okay to say and what isn't. And you also point out in several places of the book that professors aren't grading you based on your political leanings or your ideologies or your religious beliefs. You're in a class with a particular rubric and syllabus, and when they grade you, they're focused on the matters at hand, what the class was designed to do, and who you are belief-wise and ideologically will not harm your grade. One of the things that you point out is that most students arrive at college without any practice in how to have this civil discourse, this good faith dialogue. What they have had instead, is what you pointed out in one of your previous examples, is these polarizing figures in popular culture, provocateurs, and many have been trained in a debate model, which takes you into a right and wrong. Someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. And one of the things that your method does, that you lay out in the book, is it gets rid of these binaries. You're learning to love the questions and do deep inquiry and learn how to research. And in doing that, you're not going towards a preset answer. You're instead expanding your own deep thinking skills. But why do students arrive at school without being pre-trained in this? Why do they arrive not being aware of how a classroom works or even what their rights are on campus? And Chapter 3 takes us really deeply into this. Chapter 3 is called Understand the Rules and Norms of College Discourse. And you point out that students in K-12 schools in the U.S. have limited freedom of expression compared to college students and other adults. So quite simply, they've had no practice.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to make really clear, I do not see our today's students from a deficit lens. I think today's students are wonderful. And also, when I say that they're not coming prepared for this, I'm not critiquing K-12 teachers, who are some of the most important and vital, underpaid, underappreciated, and under attack people in U.S. society today. I'm really proud to say my son is studying to be a high school teacher. So I just want to make that very clear for our educators who are listening. But as you said, the rules of K-12 education, the courts have given K-12 schools a lot more power to restrict student speech. And some of that it's in the interest that, K-12 schools are considered to be not just educational institutions in the sense of conveying content. How do we do math? How do we understand social studies? But places that, alongside of parents, are participating in the upbringing of young people. And so the rules that apply there are different. I think those of us who care about free expression in higher ed should really be thinking about whether K-12 speech rules have become much too restrictive, as I think they have. But outside of the rules of free expression, which are much more limited, and, my high school students talk about their dress codes, talk about, not being able to wear a hat with a political, wear a hat at all, or a t-shirt with a political slogan on it, things like this. But outside of that, I think there's also the way that the K-12 schooling has really moved toward these high-stakes assessments, in which a lot of what students are charged with doing, are tasked with doing, is, demonstrating reading comprehension of short form texts in writing, as opposed to engaging in deep dialogue with each other or with their teachers. You have large class sizes, you have these mandates to do a certain kind of focus. And so a lot of our students, they've been in a process where succeeding didn't include learning to be in a state of collaborative inquiry with others. And there are some exceptions. If you're a student who played a team sport or was in a theater troupe or a musical ensemble or on, a robotics club, you might have had some really great experience, or Model UN. You might have had some really great experience, or collaboratively getting something done with some other people, learning something collaboratively with some other people. But the primary modality of showing that you are academically competent, such that you can earn a diploma and admission to college, doesn't consist of showing humility. And then the college application process itself, you're supposed to show that you have this degree of attainment. I'm better, numerically better than other people. I'm at the top of my class. We tend to measure people, and we don't have a mechanism for measuring high school students, maybe other than sports, on how well they work together.
In that chapter, you take us into some interesting court cases that give us examples of freedom to speak versus freedom not to speak. One is Morse v. Frederick, and another one is the Mahoney case, which I think people might still be familiar with because it was quite sensational at that time. Can you talk to us about how it's still a matter of unsettled opinion in some ways? I mean, if these are going to the level of the Supreme Court, people still aren't really sure how you use your First Amendment and your free speech rights and when you can't.
Yes. So for listeners who didn't follow the BLV Mahoney case, this was a high school student who did not get placed on a cheerleading squad and posted on Snapchat a profanity about that fact and said, F cheer in the school and F everything. In a Snapchat account that was seen only by, friends and vanished. And the school disciplined her for this and defended that discipline all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. The Supreme Court did side with the student. So you can't, the school couldn't discipline her for that particular Snapchat post. But the court did not say what I think I would have hoped they would say, which is the schools can't punish students for things that they do outside of school unless they are directly bullying or hurting, a member of the school community, right? So if a student is just speaking, including about the school, that it's none of the school's business. And I actually consider this a very conservative position if we want to be real about that, because this student was not an orphan. The student was not a ward of the state. This student did not live with the vice principal or the principal of this school. This student had parents. And so if the parents are okay with them speaking profanely outside of school hours to their friends, as 100% of students do probably, about school, then there's good news, school district. There's nothing for you here. You can enjoy your afternoon. You don't have to go after this person. That's not what the court said. The court said, they went out of their way to say they weren't approving of the speech, which was really core political speech. It was someone critiquing the government authority that she had the most experience with and submission to. What they said was, schools are going to be able to govern out of school speech only in limited circumstances, including when it's deeply connected to the school. And they contemplated areas such as bullying and harassment, which I agree they have the authority to regulate. In the post-BLV Mahoney world, it remains uncertain how much of out-of-school speech schools can regulate, which means that students have to be watching themselves. When you don't have an answer about the question of how much authority the authority figure in your life has, you're going to be careful and you're going to speak less. So I think that case, it was a win for the student, but there's an enormous amount of uncertainty. And then at the higher ed level, I'd say the uncertainty is also much higher at this time because there's been so much regulation of student speech in the past couple of years.
And you tell us in chapter 3 that there is also freedom not to speak. You take us into harassment and defamation, and you take us into why all of this matters for college students. As you pointed out a few moments ago, this chapter is not about a deficit in the K-12 experience. It's about students arriving in a brand new environment where they're supposed to level up into a new set of skills. And it's really awareness for both the students and the professors that this new environment is where they gain these skills, and the students need to be scaffolded. As you said, the professors need to make it explicit. And a lot of the appendix at the back, reflection questions for faculty, is really helping faculty think more deeply about what kind of environment they have in their classroom and how explicit they are about the norms, not only in helping their students get scaffolded and level up, but in considering their own awareness of how they're presenting themselves and what they believe is just assumed knowledge. And this chapter really helps unpack that we can't assume the knowledge, because the K-12 environment is designed for a different system. And in this new system, professors need to be prepared to really help students understand it and thrive. Chapter 4 is called Listen and Read with a Mindset of Informed Generosity and Grace. Chapter 5 is Communicate to be Understood. Chapter 6 is Where Do I Fit? Engage in Self-Reflection. In the acknowledgments, you give us a window into who you were when you started in this field. That feedback was something that was uncomfortable for you when you would send out something to be published or to be read. And you've come to understand that feedback and this kind of dialogue is a generous thing that helps us all. Can you talk a bit about your own journey in the last few minutes that we have in writing this book and coming to the awareness of why we need to try to love the questions?
Sure. I think in my own teaching, I kind of pull apart my classes and my syllabi every semester. I spend time at the end of the semester and in semester asking people, how's it going? What's working for you? And over the years, the thing that's become really clear to me is that we can accomplish much more together. We can have great classes if we take the time to talk together about what we want to accomplish together. And what I've found in my classes is that when I tell people, like, I've assigned you to do a moot court oral argument, not because I'm mean and I want you to sort of sweat, but because I know that this exercise brings out the best in people, improves their confidence, gets them in touch both with the material and their own abilities better than anything else I've come up with. And here's how it's going to go. People rise to the occasion. And in my experience, I look at what my students are producing in my classes now compared to what they did the first time I tried some of these exercises that I do. And it's so much better. And it's because I teach it better. It's because I scaffold it better. And I think it's nice that I have students from 2013, 14, 15 who think fondly back on my classes and say so, because my classes now are so much better than those were. And so I'm really, really interested in the idea of how we take that time that we've committed to spend together in a class and make it great. And I think that's a lot of my journey. I mean, personally, I definitely believe that teaching fulfills something in me, in terms of making it possible for young people to meet their potential to live their lives, to become whoever they want to be for whatever reason they want it to. But I think particularly the journey toward focusing on how we spend this time together. It's the most joyful part of being a teacher, I think, in a lot of ways, but it's also, I think, understudied. And a lot of what I see out there, it focuses on open-mindedness, or it focuses on heterodoxy without inquiring into what those concepts really look like in the context of trying to understand so that we can solve problems in our world. And higher education does concern itself not just with everybody having a moment to speak. That's just social media. Higher education concerns itself with how do we take these processes and conversations and make them an opportunity for us to come to understand the world and each other better, such that we can make our world better. And so it has it has a kind of guardrails and a set of practices that we won't find on YouTube or, just a simple, like social media site. We're trying to do something so much more special. And I think when as faculty, we focus on the how, really magical things can happen, which is why I'm actually happy to say the next book is going to be very specifically geared toward teachers on how we create those spaces where these great things happen.
Finally, what do you hope this episode sparks for listeners?
I'd like to see people have a little bit of hope. It's not a very hopeful time in higher ed in that, it seems like, it is the case that there are attacks on higher ed, and there's a lot of hand-wringing, that we're under attack because we got so much wrong. And I am very, very eager to engage in self-reflection and take accountability for the things that higher ed gets wrong. It's too expensive. It's wildly too expensive. And what we do is special because it's a truth-seeking endeavor. And part of the reason we're under attack is that we are unafraid and we are tasked with facing the kinds of truths that people in power often find inconvenient. And so we need to keep doing that.
Thank you so much for being here today, Professor Lara Schwartz, and sharing your book, Try to Love the Questions, From Debate to Dialogue in Classrooms and Life. You've been listening to The Academic Life. I'm Dr. Christina Gessler, inviting you to please join us again.